Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is YOMA Lamed Ches. We begin right on top of the Yomid. Says the Gemara Niknar Na'asu Nisim Lidal Soisav. Going back to our Mishnah, which told us that Niknar's doors experienced miracles. Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in the Brisa Ma Nisim Na'asu Lidal Soisav. What exactly happened to his doors? Amru, the story went as follows. Ksheholach Niknar Lahavi Dalsois. When Niknar traveled over to Egypt to bring doors, he wanted to donate some copper doors. Rashi says they were designated for the Shar HaMizrach of the Azara. So where did he go? He went to get these doors from Alexandria in Egypt, which apparently was the bastion of culture and art at that time. He wanted to get some artistically designed doors, and he went to get them, and on his way back, B'chazirasai, on his return at sea, Amad Olav Nachshel Shabiyan. Suddenly, a storm erupted, Litavai, to the extent that it threatened to sink them. It threatened to sink the ship that he was on. Notlu Achas Mehem, so the fellows on ship decided, there's no choice, we have to lighten the load. They took one of these doors, V'tilu alayam, they tossed it into the sea. V'adayin loinoch hayam izapai, and still, the sea was still raging. There was no choice but to send the second one into the sea as well. Pikshu lahatas chaverta, they wanted to throw the second door into the ocean as well to lighten the load. This time he wouldn't allow it. Amad hu, so he got up, v'karcha, and Nikna wrapped his hands around that door and he says, it's either both or none. Amar lam, he tells them, Hatiluni ima, toss me in together with the door. So Mefarshim explain, apparently he was willing to be Meiser Nefesh, so that he doesn't return to Yerushalayim empty-handed, and it will appear like a Chilul Hashem. Look, after all this effort, it ends in such dismal failure. So he was willing to have himself tossed into the sea as well. Hashem saw this great Mesiras Nefesh, and as a result of this self-sacrifice, Miyad Noch Hayam Mizapai, suddenly the sea calmed down, and they continued on their journey back to Eretz Yisrael. But he still was distressed. He felt bad about the other door that was tossed into the sea. Some Farshim explain, he was thinking to himself, now, look, I was Meiser Nefesh, and look what Hashem did for me. He reciprocated by calming down the sea. What if I would have done that originally? At the first opportunity, by that first door, I would have exhibited this level of Mesiras Nefesh. Perhaps I would have been zoichet to that Siyata D'Shmaya, and I would have salvaged that door. See, he felt bad about the first door. Hashem saw that he felt bad, and he was sort of doing tshuva on not being Meiser Nefesh. So explains the Level Yo, and therefore look what happened. Kivish Shigil in the Mullah Shel Akoy. Once they arrived at the port of Akoy, they noticed something strange alongside the ship. They see this other ship, this other door, protruding from beneath, sticking out from beneath the side of the ship. So Hashem made a name that it swam along, and now he had a pair of doors. There was a different version about what happened. Bria Shabayam. There was some sort of fish, a large whale, which swallowed that first door. Viki Asal Yabasha, swam along and spit it out onto dry land, and now he had both doors. Volea Omar Shlomo, and in anticipation of this event, Shlomo Melech in Shir Shirim stated the pasuk Kairos Batenu Arazim Rohitenu Biroisim. Rohitenu, Rashi says, is a lashon of running, like a door which swings back and forth. Biroisim. I'll take Biroisim instead of reading Biroisim, Ella Bris Yam. Some say Brisim. There was a covenant, a bond between both doors. We're going to always be together. And indeed, they caught up with each other. Another pshat in Rashi is Brias Yam. It was a creature at sea which helped them along. So this was the nace which occurred with Niknar's doors. Lefichach, says the Gemara, Kol ha'sha'arim shoy b'mikdash. Nishtanu liyeshal zav. That's why, on account of this event, of the great nisim that occurred here, when it came time to upgrade the doors in the Beis Hamikdash from copper to gold, they did them to all the doors. Kol ha'sharim sheba Mikdash nishtanu. They were upgraded liyeshal zav chutz mishare niknar. They wanted to leave that shar as is because of the nisim that occurred, and they wanted it to be a standing testimony to the nisim that occurred on account of his Mesiras Nefesh. So they left it as is in its original copper form. Some explain why wasn't it upgraded? Because it was such beautiful silver copper. It had a goldy look to it and didn't need to be upgraded to gold. It was very pure copper, and it glanced, radiated like gold. So it didn't need to be upgraded to gold. Continues the Mishnah. In the previous Mishnah we had a list of the honor roll, all these generous donors to the Beis Hamikdash. And the Mishnah concluded, Ve'elu maskir noisen l'shvach, and the Chachamim would recall their name with praise and gratitude. In the following Mishnah we have a list of individuals who we recall with in a negative light. These fellows were possessive, stingy, and would not share their knowledge with others to the detriment of the Beis Hamikdash. Ve'elu l'gnai, and the following were on the blacklist. Shel Beis Garmu, the family of Garmu, le'rotzu l'lamed al mas lechem apanim. They had expertise and knowledge with respect to baking and properly forming the lechem apanim. They didn't want to share it with others. Shel Beis Haftinos, likewise the family of Beis Haftinos, le'rotzu l'lamed al mas actors. They refused to share their knowledge regarding the Torahs. They had a special ingredient, a special secret recipe, this mala oshon grass, which they put into the Torahs, which would form a very straight and direct cloud of oshon going straight up, which was ideal for the Torahs, and they didn't want to share it with others. They want to keep a monopoly, to keep the prices high. Hugras ben Levi, he was the choir master. Although he had intricate knowledge of the chachma of song and music, some say perek is like a chapter. He knew a certain chapter in the music book, which he wouldn't share with others. But le'rotzel lamed ben kamtzar le'rotzel lamed al masek saf. He had a certain knack for writing in a very unique way. Rashi says he would place 4 pens between his fingers and was able to write the Shem Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei simultaneously, which was the ideal way of doing it, and he wouldn't want to teach it to others. He kept it for himself. He was possessive, and we negate that type of behavior. And therefore the Mishnah says, Al Rishonim Nemar Zechet Tzadik Livracha, regarding the individuals mentioned in the former Mishnah, who were generous and giving. We apply that pasuk in Mishlei, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the remembrance of a tzaddik generates bracha. We give bracha to them, and we draw inspiration from them as well. But as opposed to these individuals in the current Mishnah, we apply the pasuk of Vishem Rishayim Yirkav, the names of Rishayim will be left to rot and rust. We don't perpetuate their memory or draw any inspiration from them. The Gemara continues with a detailed description of the episode of the Lechem Apanim with Beis Garmu and Beis Haftinos regarding the Torahs. Tanu Rabbanan Beis Garmu Yibekin b'mas Lechem Apanim. This family had expertise when it came to doing the Lechem Apanim right. But the Rotzel Lamed didn't refuse to pass it on and share it with others. This way they kept a monopoly and they kept the prices high. And the Chachamim here are going to publicize what they did. And the Chavetz Chaim in Klal Dal goes into great length to explain how do we explain why the Chachamim took the liberty to publicizing their bad deed and their averis. Don't we know that Lashon Hara is not meant to be said even if it's emes? Why is this different? The Chavetz Chaim explains with Arichas there that Isser only applies when there's room to think perhaps the person was not fully aware of the severity of what he's doing. Perhaps he was drawn by a sudden desire to do something wrong. But we have individuals who outright negate the Torah and inhibit the spread of Kavod Hashem and with their behavior. In this case, they cause a monetary loss to the Beis Hamikdash, and who knows? Perhaps if they won't be around, nobody else will have to do it. So keeping it in the family and being possessive over these secrets and this knowledge was negation of Kavod Hashem and Kavod Shemayim, and it was done overtly, outright. They knew what they were doing. They were warned, and they resisted the coaxing of the Chachamim. So here, the Rabbi says, it's a mitzvah to spread this, not publicize it, for all to know and to hear. This way, we take heed not to follow their example. So they didn't want to spread the knowledge. Sholcha Chachamim. Chachamim decide, you know what? We'll demote them. We'll get others to do their job. Sholcha Chachamim ve'hiviu umnin mil Alexandria shel Mitzrayim. Again, Alexandria, they sent for experts from there, baking experts. But yoidim lefas kamoisa. The truth is that those bakers knew exactly how to bake in accordance with the specifications, just like Beis Garmo. The only problem is they didn't know how to remove the lechem hapanim from the form from the oven without breaking it. It was a complicated procedure because remember, the lechem hapanim weren't just ordinary chalis. They had to be formed. We're going to see later on in the Masechta, like a ship, had all kinds of angles to it, and it needed to be handled delicately with care, and they didn't know how to do that. They didn't know how to remove it from the oven properly. Because these fellows from Alexandria, in order to avoid breakage, they would actually bake it on the outside of the oven instead of inside, which would require great expertise when removing the chalas. They would be masikin bachutz. They would heat up from the outside, and stick on the dough from the outside to make for convenient removal. Whereas the Beis Garmo, who were really experts, they would heat up the oven from the inside and bake from the inside, which resulted in better quality bread, properly baked and dried out. As a result of this improper baking process, the fellows from Alexandria, their bread would remain somewhat moist, wasn't baked through and through, and would eventually get moldy and get spoiled. As opposed to the Beis Garmo bread, there were successfully baked breads which would not spoil. Now, just to take a pause here, haven't we learned that there was a nace that the lechem hapanim would stay warm and fresh? So Farshim asked this kasha, and they say that firstly, we're meant to do everything within our ability to produce proper bread which would not spoil. And number two, perhaps it's during that time in history when that nace was not something that occurred, and therefore they could not rely on that nace. The Chachamim had to ensure that the lechem hapanim was baked properly. The Chachamim heard that the newcomers didn't have the same level of expertise as Beis Garmo did. They said, look, in exasperation, they said, look, we have no choice. Whatever Hashem created in this world, He created in order to serve Hashem. And evidently, as it says, as the Rabbi Chanal explains in the next Gemara with the Beis Avtinis, listen to this lashon. He says that Hashem was nosan chochma lezeh yosem izeh limaneu. The fact that Hashem endowed this additional measure of expertise and chachma to this fellow, over this fellow, what does that tell you about that person's mission and role in life? So that person who is given this expertise, this ability, this talent, should be the one to fulfill this mission and this shlichus. Nobody else can take it from him. That was the conclusion they drew from this discrepancy in expertise. The fact is, they were given the expertise, they were given the know-how. Apparently Hashem wants them to do the job. It's their tafkid. You can't take it away from them. Says the Gemara, indeed, Beis Garmo will restore to their former position. How did that happen? Chachamim went to look for them. This time they played hard to get, they played hardball, we're not coming back. In exasperation, they went ahead and they doubled their pay. Now suddenly they had time, they showed up. Ordinarily, their fee was 12 mana. Suddenly they went up to 24. Ordinarily they took 24 mana. Now they doubled the salary to 48. So we see that this was their primary interest, that monetary interest in mining. Now Chacham confront them and said, what's going on? Why are you so possessive? What's the point of not sharing? Perhaps somebody can do it cheaper. If you have the Hashem in mind, you have Hegdish in mind, then go ahead and outsource it. Maybe somebody can do a cheaper job and save Hegdish money. Omer Lahem, they said, look, they justified their position. Of course, this was just an excuse. They said, the thing is that our ancestors were fully aware that the Beis Hamikdash eventually will get destroyed. It's not going to last forever. And they were concerned if this knowledge spreads, perhaps somebody unworthy will get a hold of this knowledge and use it improperly. He'll use this expertise to serve Avodah Zarah. And therefore we don't want to spread the knowledge, we keep it in the family. Says the Gemara, despite the fact that we criticize them, but credit is due when due. We give them credit for the following. For the following, we recall them with praise. It never happened that any one of their children would be found walking out with clean, high-quality bread, in order to avoid any impression. Nobody will have any basis for suspicion that they are siphoning off from the lechem apanim. So this was something praiseworthy. L'kayim Hashem in fulfillment of the pasuk, v'yisem nekiyam Hashem Yisrael, meant to have a good impression, to create a good reputation by Hashem and also by Yisrael. Continues the Gemara with almost an exact replica. Shal Beis Gamliel, L'Rasul Lamed, Amas L'Akteris. The Beis Avtinis would not share their expertise when it came to Akteris. Turn it up on them. Beis Avtinis Bekin v'Mas Akteris. L'Rasul Lamed. Beis Avtinis were experts in Akteris and how to grind it, how to mix it, and that secret ingredient, they would not share it and pass it on. Chacham decided, okay, we're going to usurp them. And they went ahead and they called some experts from Alexandria, some Keteris experts. In fact, they were pretty close. They knew how to grind and mix up the Keteris recipe, but they didn't know where to find that special grass. They certainly had some type of grass which would have a similar effect on the straight direction, the upward direction of the smoke, but it wasn't the same. They didn't have that particular grass which would have that done really properly. Whereas by the Beis Havtinos, their smoke would go straight up kimaka like a stick. As opposed to the Keteris produced by the other umnin, maftzia lakan would branch out in all directions. Chacham heard that this was so. Amr, once again they said, Kol whatever Hashem created in this world was meant to be put in the service of Hashem. Shnemar, everything was for Hashem. And apparently, as the Rach explained, the fact that they have that expertise, they're meant for the job. Beis Havtinos l'mkayman, and indeed Beis Havtinos was returned to their former position. They got the job back. How did that happen? Chacham called for them, and they refused to return until they doubled their pay. Kaflem scharan ubo, they doubled their salary and they came running. Ordinarily they took 12 mana, and today it went up to 24. Usually it was 24. Now it went up to 48. Chacham confronted them, they asked them, what's the point of not telling out? They said, look, our family knows, eventually Beis Hamikdash will be destroyed. Amru, They were concerned. Shama Yilmoid Adam Shenim Mahugan, perhaps an unworthy fellow will get a hold of this knowledge. V'yelech v'yavoid avodas kachavim b'kach, and he'll worship avodah zarah using this knowledge. Therefore, we keep it in the family. Says the word, despite the fact that we relate to them with disdain, but we do give them credit for the following. We recall them with praise, because it never happened that a kala would leave their home wearing perfume. In fact, even when one of those fellows would go and marry an isha from a different town, they would precondition with the following. Mas and Ima, they would stipulate with her, that she should not wear perfume. Why? In order to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Nobody should have any grounds to say that they are using the Torah's material. Fulfillment of the pasuk, V'yisem nekim me'Hashem u'Yisrael. Continues the Gemara, Tanya Amar Bishmo, Pam achas. It so happens that I was once walking on the road, and I met one of their grandchildren, and this was after the Churban Beis Hamikdash. I told him, I gave him some mussar. I said, look what happened. Look what happened at the end. Look, your parents wanted to increase their coverage, to establish their family legacy, and by way of doing so, to mitigate the covet of Malkim, to increase the expenditure of the Beis Hamikdash, keep a monopoly and keep it in the family. And look what happened at the end. Achshav, look what happened now. Covet of Malkim, now Hashem's covet is intact. He didn't lose anything. Umi it kvoidam, but Hashem lessened their covet. They're out of business. Amar Bekiva Pamachas, Sochli Rabbi Shmuel ben Luga. It so happens that once Rabbi Shmuel ben Luga related to me the following incident that happened with him. Pam achas yotzasi ani ve'echad mi b'nei b'neim. It occurred once that myself and one of their grandchildren went out l'soda to the field l'laket asavim to gather some grasses for isi, and I noticed this boy who was a descendant of the Beis Avtina's family. I noticed him doing something strange. Suddenly his motions were triggered. He began laughing and then crying. I turned to him and I says, why did you suddenly begin to cry? Amarli says, I recall the great honor that my parents, my ancestors experienced during the time Beis Hamikdash. Therefore I began to cry for the kavod that is now not there. That explains why you began to cry, but why did you suddenly begin to laugh? Amarli, he responded, because I know with certainty, with Amunah, that Hashem will restore that. Hashem will return us to that position during the Binyan Beis Hamikdash. Now, what brought about this emotional response? What triggered your emotions? Amarli, he responded, Mala Oshan Kinegdi. I noticed that secret grass, Mal Oshan grass, right opposite me. And that's what triggered my emotions. Harayuli, please show it to me. Amarli, he says, no, absolutely not. Shvuhi biyadenu, we have a promise. We swore. We have a commitment in the family. She'ein maran oisei l'chol adam. We never show it to anybody. There's more than another story. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Pam achas motzasi zaken echad. I once met an elderly fellow from Beis Avtinos. U'megilas Samimonam biyale. He was holding a scroll containing a description, perhaps drawings, of these various grasses used at Torah, and it contained that secret ingredient, secret recipe. I asked him, from where do you hail? I'm actually from Beis Avtinos. What are you holding? Yeah, this is the scroll which contains the ingredients for the Torah. Can you show it to me? Amarli, he responded, actually, I'll give it to you. Because as long as my family was intact, and there's a girsa, which is really the punchline, they were tzenuin, they were men of integrity, yirei shamayim, and were trustworthy. In that case, we kept the secret in the family. They wouldn't share with others. But now things have changed, and my family is no longer the same. They don't have the same madrega. They're no longer trustworthy. They're no longer men of integrity. I can't really trust them with this secret recipe. Now, look, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to entrust it in your hands. Take it, vizarba, and take good care of it. This was the end of the story. Continues Rabbi Yehuda Nuri. Ugshabasi v'sachti dvorai. Rabbi Akiva. When I went and I related the story to Rabbi Akiva, Amali, he says, "Wow, I'm impressed." Miyata, going forward, after this Zakin Echad from Beis Avtinos exhibited this great self-sacrifice, he abdicated the family legacy. He gave out the secret to an outsider for the sake of Kavod Shamayim, to secure and maintain the secret recipe of Kteris, to keep it in good hands. Now, let's change our attitude. We no longer may relate to these individuals with negativity. Mikan Omar ben Azai, based on the aforementioned event or events with Beis Avtinos and Beis Garmo, listen to this. Ben Azai concluded the following: this applies to every one of us today. No matter what happens, if it's destined for you, if his job is meant for you, they'll call you. They'll make the phone call to you. They'll call you by name. Just as Beis Avtinos and Beis Garmo were called back by the Chachamim, despite their efforts to demote them. They'll put you back in your place where you belong. Says Rashi 7 lines from the bottom. From these stories, Chacham wanted to push them away. They weren't successful. Hashem willed otherwise. What do we learn? Person never has room for worry. Somebody else will take away my parnasa, take over my business, take over my share. No. Everybody has his mission, his unique tafkid in life. And Hashem will make sure you are given the opportunity to fulfill that mission. Otherwise, He wouldn't have created you. If it's meant for somebody else, He created that person, not you. It's inevitable. They will call you by name. Come back into your place. Continues the Gemara on the base. And they'll give you what belongs to you. Says Rashi on top. Nobody's going to give you any money. Everything was predetermined and predestined and written in Shamayim every Rosh Hashanah. Don't worry about competition in business. The Chavetz Chaim's Rebbetzin trained her competition. She trained her into the business. She had a grocery and she helped her friend open a new grocery in the same town. Don't worry about competition. Whatever's meant for you will come. Will come in any case. Continues the Gemara with a very well-known statement. There's nobody in the world who can actually touch, encroach, interfere with what is destined for his friend. Likewise, one kingdom cannot interfere with the others. Even a hair's breadth. What's basher for you, you will get. Nobody can encroach. Hugras ben Levi, says the Gemara, he was the choir master. And once again, he's on the blacklist for refusing to share his musical expertise. What would he do? When he wanted to express this beautiful melodious sound, he would insert his thumb into his mouth and somehow maneuver it in a way which was so beautiful, which emitted such beautiful sounds. And place his finger between the 2 points by his lip, Rashi says, near his nose, such a beautiful melody emitted that his fellow Kehanim were so shocked, they would jump back in wonderment and amazement. He wouldn't share his calligraphic expertise. The following was said about him. He would grab 4 quills at once. If he was going to write a 4-letter word as the Shem Hashem, He would write it all at once without any interruption. Farshim explained the Shem Hashem represents Hashem's achdus and unity. So ideally, you write it all at once. It's really one unit, says the Rogat Shava going from Dvinsk. It's one entity, although we have to write it in 4 steps. We can't write it at once. But ideally, if you can write it all at once, that's perfect. That's achdus. That's true oneness. And he knew how to do that. He wouldn't share it. Chacham asked him, what good is it? Why can't you share it? You know, all the other ones had some sort of response, some sort of justification, at least in their minds. We're worried about Avodah Zarah benefiting from it, but he had no excuse. This fellow had no response because nobody cared. Nobody Avodah Zarah cares much about achdus and about writing things at once. So why wouldn't he share it? Says the Gemara, on the previous ones, we apply the pasuk Zechatz al Gevracha. In fact, some Farshim explain that after the Beis Gamru Sabtinas justified their position, and in fact, there's even a girsa that Hugras ben Levi, the Teishu Shannon brings in the name of Tesefta, that he also had that response. He says, look, this beautiful music that I know how to do, I don't want the Avodah Zarah to get a hold of it, so he also had a response. And some explain that according to this Brice's Shita, all those, Beis Gamru, Beis Haftinas, and Ben Levi, who were able to justify their position, they were now included in the pasuk Zechatz al Kevracha. Ben Kamtzer v'chaver, as opposed to this fellow Ben Kamtzer and all others who are possessive and stingy when it comes to knowledge and are not concerned with kavod shemayim. We apply the pasuk Nemar v'shem Rishayim Yirkav. My v'shem Rishayim Yirkav. What does that mean? The name of Rishayim will be left to rot and to get rusty, as Rashi says. Says the Gemara, the names will remain inactive. Amar Belazar Rakvivus Talab Shmoisam. Their names get rusty. What does that mean? We never give a newborn a name after a Rasha. We don't perpetuate their memory. It's a bad mazel to have a name of a Rasha applied to a child. Asks the Teisei Shanim. So how can we find many Chachamim with the name Yishmael, Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, etc. And there's one pshat, actually, I think what the Ritva says, because he did Shuvah. Shmuel did Shuvah at the end of the days, but the Teisei Shanim says a different territory. That name was given by Hashem. That has a different different halacha, a different value. Since it was given by Hashem, we can go ahead and apply it to a child. Masav Ravina Rin asked the Kasha. We don't name after Rasha. Masav Doyeg ben Yosef. There's a story concerning a child named Doyeg. Doyeg was a Rasha. And they gave this name to a child, Doyeg ben Yosef. She'nichai Aviv. His father passed away when the child was still a baby. Nichai Aviv ben Katan Limai. Passed away while he was still a baby. And he only had his mother. His mother was a wealthy woman. And every day she would measure him with tfachim, see how much he grew, and out of gratitude to Hashem, she would donate. And the added weight, whatever she estimated, the extra weight, which was added per day, she would weigh some gold and give that weight of gold to the Beis Hamikdash. When the enemy prevailed and conquered Yerushalayim, and there was this great famine, she actually killed the kid and ate it. And in advance of this very, very tragic event, Yirmiyah in Eicha cried and lamented, how could this be that women will eat their offspring? And the pasuk continues, and Hashem responds, and this is the end of the pasuk. This was as a response of the Averis that they did. They killed the Kohen and Navi. In any case, we see that they did name a child with the name of a Rasha, Doyeg. Says the Marchazi Madas Masalakve. But take a look at what happened here. A tragic end occurred, perhaps as a result of him getting such a name of a Rasha. Amar Belaza, Tzadik me'atzmoi v'rasha mechaver. A tzaddik is praised and a bracha applied to him, perhaps even on account of himself, on account of his own personal good deeds. V'rasha mechaver. A rasha is always lumped with others. His group is other Rishayim who influence each other to do bad. Maral explains that being a tzaddik is just natural. That's just the way to go. It's just innate nature of a Yisrael to be good. A rasha is generally a result, a product of outside influence, whether it's his friends, neighbors, who draw a person to bad. So when it comes to disparaging a rasha, cursing a rasha, blaming a rasha, we don't just blame the individual, we group him together with all his cohorts, with all the other Rishayim. They're jointly responsible for each other. Tzaddik mi'atzma, we do find that tzaddik is blessed on his own. The chsiv zeichet tzaddik, even lashon yachad tzaddik levrach. V'rosh mechaver, he's lumped with others. The chsiv v'shem rishayim, it's lashon rabim yirkav. Amali Ravina larum rabban. Ravina turned to this Talmud Chacham, to have a mesader agad kamei, who would present divrei agad in front of him. He says, by the way, do you know the source for this concept? From where do we learn the following statement? That the remembrance of the name of a tzaddik evokes bracha, and we draw inspiration from him. Amar lei, so he said very passionate. It's a pasuk in Mishlei. Doksiv zeichet tzaddik levracha. No. He said miderais minolan. Where do we find this concept in the Torah? Chamisha Torah. Doksiv. So he says very passionate. Amar, you right? That bracha is associated with tzaddik. Hashem Amar, Hamachasani me'Avram, Mashani Oiseh. Hashem says, I'm going to keep from Avram my plans with relation to Stoim. I can't do that. And the very mention of Avram, as it says, if it was a tzaddik, evoked further positive regard and bracha. And Hashem Himself continues, "V'ksiv Avram ha'yeh l'goy gadol v'atzam." So we see the mere mention of a tzaddik evokes bracha. He further asked him, well, where's the makar for the concept of Shem Yisham Yirkav? So he said, very pasha, it's a pasuk. Amalei dachsiv v'Shem Yisham Yirkav. No, midarais minon. I want a source from the Torah. Dachsiv. So he responded, it's another pasuk. But yeah, that's time. We find that Loit camped until Stoim. The mere mention of Stoim, the place of Rishayim, already evokes klala and negativity. Uksiv anshi Stoim roim achatoim Hashem oid. The pasuk highlights their bad deeds, their bad maisim, so that we are fully aware of their bad maisim and we take heed and don't follow their example. So on the one hand, it's tzaddik evokes bracha and influences to do good. Some explain that the mentioning of the name of a tzaddik that in itself brings a hashpah on the person and just implants you with inspiration, just relating to a tzaddik and to his memory. Whereas a rasha has the opposite effect. Amar Belaza, listen to this. Tzaddik gedor mishnei rishon. We find in history a story where a tzaddik lived between two rishon, amongst two wicked people, and he refused to be influenced. He remained steadfast in his tzidkus. On the other hand, we have a rasha who was dar ben shnei tzaddikim. He lived with two great tzaddikim, was the greatest in the world, and he remained immune. He wasn't influenced by the tzaddikim. He remained steadfast in his wicked ways. Who are these people? Tzaddik dar ben shnei rishayim, v'lo lamed ma'asem. Who was that? Evadia, who lived with Achav and Izeval, wicked people, and he remained a tzaddik. This is in contrast to the rasha, who was dar ben shnei tzaddikim, v'lo lamed ma'asem. Who was that? The Esav. Esav lived with Yitzchak and Rivka, his parents. He remained Esav. So what do we see? Shraga Feivel Menlowitz, the founder of Shiva Torah Das, used to say, I'll first say it in Yiddish and then translate. He used to say, the best the Musa Sefer is their Men Shalem. He used to say like this, a person could choose all kinds of Sifrei Musar and Chasidus to inspire him to be good. But the main thing is to internalize the message. The best Musa Sefer is the person himself. So, you can live amongst Tzaddikim, remain a rasha. Live amongst Rishayim, and self-generate your righteousness. It's up to the person. It's all in his hands. From the fact that we praise and heap bracha on tzaddikim, the fact that we see how great a person can be, how much he could accomplish. From that, we learn. We derive a contrast. We draw a parallel. Atalamid klal l'rishayim. We draw a parallel and we apply klal to rishayim. Look, not only are you bad, but look what you could have been. So the tzaddik creates that contrast, which helps us put the rasha in an even worse light. On the other hand, we have from the klal of rishayim, the fact that we negate them when we appreciate their wickedness. We draw a contrast to tzaddikim. We say, look, wow, look what they had to overcome. Look how different the tzaddik is. And it brings us a true appreciation of a tzaddik, atalamid, bracha l'tzaddik. Where do we find this in the Torah? B'brachasin shel tzaddikim, atalamid, klal l'rishayim. We contrast the rishayim to the tzaddikim. We say, dechsiv, ki yidat v'lman asher yitzav. We have the pasuk referring to Avram's greatness. He perpetuated the tradition, the Torah, and handed over to his children. So that was his tzidkus. Uksiv basrei, and right afterwards it says, this is in contrast to Stoim v'Amoyer. Vayom Hashem zaka Stoim v'Amoyer kirabo. So look, not only didn't they follow in Avraham Avinu's footsteps, look how wicked they are. We see that contrast. Umikilalasan shel Rishayim atalomed brocha tzaddikim. On the other hand, from relating to Rishayim and the wickedness and the cloth that's applied to them, we come to appreciate and apply bracha to tzaddik. D'chsiv anshi stoim roim chatam l'Hashem. What does the pasuk say? V'Hashem omar la'Avram achrei porei deloit me'imoy. So you see that Hashem begins referring to with reference to the chatoim, the stoim v'amor, and then the Torah continues discussing Avram Avinu. And actually, in the next pasuk, we have the bracha that Hashem tells him, you're going to inherit Eretz Yisrael, etc. So, the fact that there are Risham in the world, that generates more appreciation for the tzaddikim, their accomplishments, and how much more so, they deserve bracha from Hashem. Even one tzaddik justifies the Bria Sa'olam. Hashem took a look at the the revelation, the ultimate gilui that we're going to experience Lasad Love, the purpose of creation, the entire concept of Bria Sa'olam. And he said, Ki Toiv. On account. I'm doing this because of the Toiv. Who's that? Ve'en Toiv el tzaddik. Toiv is a tzaddik. So, because of a tzaddik, Hashem created the world. Shenemar imru tzaddik ki Toiv. We see tzaddik is synonymous with Toiv. Quality is greater than quantity. The world could be filled with non-tzaddikim, but even if there's only one tzaddik, that's enough to justify the creation of the world. We have a few statements from Rabbi Lazar, so we just go from one to the next. If one doesn't take enough care, doesn't love the Torah enough to take enough care to review the Torah and internalize it in a way that he won't forget it. Disregards his Torah and allows it to get forgotten from him. That can result in his children going to exile. You'll forget Hashem's Torah. I'll forget your children. I think the Ben Yehuda explains, referring to observations that a person himself can come up with when he learns Torah, is Chidushim, which a person should go ahead and take care to write down. They can review it and remember it. So the Gemara is specifically speaking about a person's own chidushim, which, if not recorded, will be forgotten. The Gemara you can always relearn, but a person's own observations, unless they're recorded, they'll get forgotten. So that's what the Gemara says. His own personal part in Torah. He must take care to keep that intact. That's why the equation works. The Torah that he generates is equated to his children, because that's his ruchnius offspring, that's his gashmius offspring, and two things go hand in hand. If one disregards the Torah that he learns and allows it to get forgotten, they demote him, they remove him from his position. Shenemar ki ato hadas ma'asta. You didn't really care to keep the Torah fresh in your memory. You were moyis. You disregarded, you disparaged the Torah. And as a result, I will be moyis in your occupying this great position. So the fact that he was moyis in Torah He had disdain for Torah. He deserves a midah that Hashem is moyes in his position of authority. Ain't tzaddik niftu min ha'olam. Before a tzaddik departs this world, another tzaddik has already been created to fill his shoes. Shenemar v'zorach hashemesh uba hashemesh. This is a pasuk in Koheles. The sun rises, the sun sets. Isn't that obvious? Apparently there's a drasha here referring to the tzaddikim who are equated to the rising sun. And the pasuk is saying that the sun will rise even before the sun will set. Actually, kafsa shimshe shel Eli, as we find in history, before Eli HaKohen's sun set, before he was nifter, Hashem already prepared a replacement. Zorcha shimshe shel Shmuel HaRamasi. Shmuel HaRamasi's sun began to shine. He already started to experience nevuah, even during Eli's lifetime. Amar B'chira Abba Rav Yechon, Ruach HaKadosh Baruch Hu shetzadikim mu'atim. Hashem knew in advance that there will be very few tzaddikim in this world, and therefore He distributed them throughout history. He went and He planted them in every generation, a little bit in every generation, to sustain the world, to influence the world, whether overtly or covertly. The fact that a tzaddik is around, he increases the kedusha in the world and has an influence upon the inhabitants of the world at that time. Shenemar k'l Hashem mitzukei eretz. Hashem has the mitzukei, the bedrock of the world. These are tzaddikim that sustain the world. Vayoshes aleim tevo, and Hashem based the world on them, supported the world on them, and He had to distribute them throughout history so that they're found in every generation. Don't worry about the fact that there's so few tzaddikim today. Even for one tzaddik, Hashem keeps the world going. Shenamar v'tzaddik Yesoid Olam Tzaddik, even Lashon Yachid. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, Rabbi Yehuda was the one who quoted this in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, but now he himself added his own addition. Amar Mihacha, approved from the following pasuk, that even one tzaddik can keep up the world. Raglei Chasidav Yishmar. Rashi explains the word Raglei here means Bishvil, because as a result of Chasidav Yishmar, Hashem maintains the world. Chasidav Tuva Mashma. What do you mean? One tzaddik. Chasidav is Lashon Rab. Not only one. In the spelling, it's without the second yud. Chasidoi ksiv. So as far as the spelling, it's referring to one tzaddik. And even one chassid, one tzaddik, keeps the world going. It justifies the existence of the world. So we see once again quality is so much more valuable and so much more meaningful than just quantity. Once a person passes his midlife point, he's already lived roiv of his lifetime, and he resisted sin, that guarantees that he will have that continued experience and be insulated from chet. Shenema ragli chasidav yishman. Here we apply ragli as in regel, foot. The end of the person, the end of his lifetime will be secure and free of chet. Now the obvious kasha is, how can we say that? How can we say that a person is guaranteed to finish his life safely? We know Yechon Kohen Gadol was a Kohen Gadol for 80 years in a tzaddik, and then afterwards he went off. Says the Teis Yishanim, it doesn't mean it's guaranteed. It means he gets an added measure of Siyat L'Shmaya. We all have Siyat L'Shmaya. Once a person accomplished that much, Hashem gives him an added measure, an increased amount of Siyat L'Shmaya. I'll read the Teis Yishanim inside. He says, Mikan ve'elach. He says, Harbe machrin oisem mikan ve'elach. They grant him a lot, without any effort. They give him a tremendous measure of Tahara and Kedusha without necessarily him investing as much effort as would ordinarily be required to earn that madriga. So they give him all the much Siyat Shmaya to reach great heights. All the Sfarim speak about that. The Sefer Musach, everybody speaks about the same thing. How a person can reach a certain point where he gets tremendous measures of Siyat Shmaya to achieve greatness. Says the Gemara, another pshat using the same pasuk of a Geragle Chasid of Yishmar, Dver B'Shila Amri. They had a drasha as follows: When a person is confronted with an opportunity to do an avera, pam rishona, once, or shniya and again, he refuses to budge. He resists. Now he has a chazaka. He'll be insulated, vaccinated, will no longer fall through. Shenemar ragle chasida of Yishmar. So Rashi explains over here the word ragle is interpreted as meaning pa'amim, like shalosh regolim, like when Bilam hit his mule 3 times, says, why'd you hit me 3 times? Shalosh regolim. Regel is a time. So ragle chasida, once. He resisted chet, twice, Yishmar. From that point on, Hashem washes him, takes over, makes sure that he resists chet, and he's free, safe in the cure from sinning, at least in this chet, any further. A pasuk in Mishlei which says, this fellow wants to attach himself to scoffers and mockers and light-headed people, wants to become a late, we let him do it. We're not going to encourage him. But min hashamayim, they'll just allow it. Every person has bechira, can do what he wants. But if a person, in contrast, wants to associate with anavim, humble people, tzaddikim, he wants to rise in greatness, Hashem will give him a chen, help him find favor in the eyes of the tzaddikim, meaning Hashem will give him siyat l'shmaya to accomplish his objective. If a person wants to engage in tumah, you open up the door, go ahead. It's your choice, it's your life. But if a person wants to engage in tahara, it's not just that they let him, but they give him siyat l'shmaya to accomplish. It's analogous to a person, a merchant, who would sell kerosene, foul-smelling material, and perfume, pleasant-smelling material. He was a neft merchant, a kerosene merchant, and he would sell this shemen afarsamin, this very pleasant-smelling perfume. Now a customer shows up. Well, it depends what he's coming for. The fellow comes to get some neft, measure some neft, and purchase some of this kerosene. The merchant tells him, look, when it comes to payment, I'm right here. When it comes to filling the bucket, take care of yourself, self-service. Go fill on your own. I don't want to get involved in this foul-smelling material. But if the customer is coming to purchase a farsamay, he says, sure, I'll be right over. Wait around. Now go ahead and fill with you. So both of us, you and me, will absorb this pleasant odor. Likewise here, Hashem says, look, you want to get involved in tumah, go ahead and do it. Free world. But if you want to help yourself with tahara, I'll come and join you, and we'll do it together. When a person experiences an avera, it stuffs up his heart. It chases away his chachma, his clarity of mind. It blurs his system. He no longer can tell right from wrong. Don't get engaged in averas and eating trade foods. He'll become tummy. Now, in this second word, we don't find the aleph, which really should belong if it's meant to refer to tumah. Therefore we apply a drush. Instead of reading kipshutai, you'll become tummy. Elavinit-tamtem. You'll become a tumtum, stuffed up. Tanarabon. This indicates that there are 2 levels here. When a person does tumah, he gets an added measure afterwards. What does that mean? Even if a person engages in a bit of tumah, a little bit of avera, from Shemayim, they allow him. They don't encourage him, they don't push him, but they allow him to acquire even a greater measure of tumah, as we learn in Pirkei Avos. Avera gereris avera. You start with something small, and then he sort of pushes them to something more severe. Milamat, if a person doesn't take care to keep himself holy down here, he gets spiritually affected upstairs. If he engages in improper acts in this world, it's not something which is short-lived, has an eternal effect. On the flip side, certainly, again, 2 levels here. You'll make yourself kaddish. You'll become kaddish. What does that tell us? that a person can do a little bit down here, and Hashem gives him an added measure. Adam Mekadosh, just do a little bit Kedusha. Mitzvah Geras, Mitzvah Mekadosh Noisei Harbe. Hashem will grant him a greater measure of Kedusha, even way beyond what he did. If he's Mekadosh a bit down here, Mekadosh Noisei Milamala, he earns a spiritual asset of Kedusha in Shamayim. But if he engages in Kedusha in this world, Mekadosh Noisei Milamala, he will earn a great legacy of Kedusha, a great share of eternal, spiritual pleasure. So a brief chazar of today's daf. We began with Niknar, with the Nisim. We had the list of Shvach, of those who were generous, and on the other hand, we had the blacklist of those who were busy with themselves. We learned about Zechat Tzadikim Levracha, Shem Yisham Yirkav, the contrast. Tzadikim and Risham, Tzadikim sustain the world. And when a person is Mekadosh even a bit, he earns a great measure of Kedusha. Mekadosh Noisei Harbe Milamala, V'Skadishtem V'Isam Kedoshim, Amen Yiratzen, Hatzlacha.